who do you need to become and how are you going to show up on that journey to, like you said, you might not hit your target. Hopefully you do, but you might not. And that's okay, because who you become and what you learn about yourself and how much you grow in that process is really more valuable than any end metric. And you can always take another shot at that.
It's amazing. I mean, honestly, growth, I tell this to my clients all the time, growth only happens in a space of discomfort.
Yeah.
Right? Growth can only occur when we're uncomfortable enough that we have to adapt physically, mentally, whatever that happens to be, financially. I have a cold plunge, a little DIY kind of situation because I couldn't pull the trigger on $5,000 cold plunge. I made one. But when I'm cold plunging, I have a sign on my wall right in front of me that I stare at as I cold plunge that says, everything you ever want is on the other side of discomfort.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is it's a great lesson. And I think we understand that conceptually, like with a lot of things, again, like exercise. We understand that exercise is a good thing for us. Mm-hmm. Are we actually doing it? Or are we doing it consistently? Are we, having our ups and downs, that sort of thing? One thing that I learned a long time ago, and this was as much about me as it was about anybody else, just my own personal experience, is that I understand on a conceptual level that growth is on the other side of your comfort zone. But when you're uncomfortable and you're alone, it's really hard to lean into discomfort sometimes. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've spent a lot of time working on yourself, you're really far down that road, you're used to it, you've built up the confidence in it, that's one thing. But for a lot of people, being uncomfortable is really uncomfortable and they don't want to do it. And so, you can say to people, here's what you need to do and go do it. But again, they're not doing it. So for me, I always grew so much better and so much faster when I had guidance and consistent guidance, right? Like, are you actually in it with me? And I don't just mean you like sending me some tips. I mean, are you in it with me? When I have questions, are you there to answer them? When I've run into a challenge, are you there to guide me through it? Do I actually feel like you have my back? Amazing. Also, we need that to be consistent, right? You can't just do it once and then say, see you later. Well, I'm trying to grow here. I'm trying to work on something and I'm going to run into some challenges along the way and I'm going to have my ebbs and flows. So we need that too. We need the accountability of it to actually show up and keep showing up and do the work we say we're going to do. I'm a big believer in community. When you're surrounded with like-minded people who are also putting in the effort, who are also pushing themselves to grow. So I just think, there's this part of me that loves the world of personal development. And there's this part of me that really doesn't. And, like if you've ever been, I'm sure you've been to like a weekend workshop or something, like a Saturday, Sunday, and you're on top of the world and everything's going great. And you're like, Monday's going to be a new me. But then Monday comes and where's that person who was leading you? And where's that community that was surrounding you, all those people pumping you up and supporting you? And what happens now that you're like, okay, I'm trying this thing, but now I have a question about it, or now I'm trying to figure out the next part. Like, where is all that stuff? And this is why so much of the time people go to those like weekend events and then they come on Monday and everything just goes back to the way it was before. Sure. I just think we really need to get away from this sort of thing. We need to get into a lot more of the let's really be showing up for each other and supporting each other and being in it together and feel like we're in it together so that when we are uncomfortable, we can work through it together and keep growing and keep growing and keep growing. So I'm with you on the discomfort. Absolutely, I am. Also, let's make sure we set ourselves up to succeed in that discomfort and thrive in it as opposed to just like falling back into old habits all the time.
Sure. Couldn't agree more. Right. And I think that's a big part of all of this is the context that we speak of it in. Right. So you mentioned the weekend warrior stuff and it is frustrating for individuals who sell themselves. I won't even blame the people I won't blame anybody because we're all doing our best.
Yeah. It's not about
the people who show up, they kind of have this sense of they're being sold this idea that like, if I show up and I do some of these things and I listen, then I'm going to be motivated to make a change. Right. Mm-hmm. And I do workshops, I do retreats. I've done 2-day things. I've done things that turn into longer engagements. I always try to share with them as early as I can, like this needs to be a longer engagement. I'm not a one and done kind of guy. And at the same time, there are other aspects where, if we open ourselves to the idea that these one-day things can be a good catalyst for us to walk away. I tell my people, I did a presentation this morning, right? And I told them, if you walk away with one nugget that helps you maybe just go, I hadn't thought of it that way. and that can maybe put you on a path to something different, that's what I want. Don't try to go out and change your whole life. It's same as adding, exercise and diet into your life. Don't change everything all at once.
Right.
Maybe just one nugget can really be helpful. But to your point, I couldn't agree more with the idea, like if you want true sustainable results in changing your life, you need what I recently read a book, The Comfort Crisis. And they talk about these 90-day kind of boot camps that they do, but it's with somebody the entire time, day after day. And they talk about the idea of, to really make change, you need external structure along with internal. So you got to change the way that you think, but then you also have external structures that benefit you, right? You don't have a spouse that smokes if you smoke and you're trying to quit. Right. You don't have, you don't have somebody who's cooking pasta every night when you're trying to drastically reduce your processed carbohydrates. You don't have friends that are constantly reminding you, hey, we're having this party tonight, let's go drink and not care about the world, when you're trying to make yourself better. So the external structures that surround you are as important, if not more, than the internal, especially when you're starting off. I think there's a piece, like for me personally, I can work out pretty hard without people around me, but I also have a lot of accountability. I have friends that I work out with sometimes, and I'm like, if I want to keep up with them next week, I got to do it today. Right.
Yeah.
Or, being a coach that tells people physical health is important, that brings with me some accountability. I have
Absolutely,
to
it does.
be physically healthy. So
absolutely,
I think
it does. You got to walk the walk, right?
Yeah. So I couldn't agree with you more in that sentiment of build a community around you, especially when things are new, because once you do them more often, they become less hard, right? Or I should say, one of my favorite quotes, it doesn't become easier, you just get better.
You get better. So, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So the discomfort is less at that point.
Well, I think you also just get used to it, right? Like once you've actually developed habits, once you've been exercising, like you said, you've been doing it for years. Once you've been doing it for years, so like I would say this for exercise, my exercise patterns might change. Like I don't do CrossFit anymore. I do other things, right? And it's like the things that you do change, but there's no part of, actually, you know what? Last week, here's a good example of this. I'm sitting with my wife and she's saying, my wife goes to the gym four mornings a week, which I love. And she says to me, I just got to a point recently where I realized I will be exercising for the rest of my life. Because before that, she'd kind of go through her periods where she'd exercise and then maybe not exercise. And then she'd just start exercising and then not exercise. And she's at that point now where she's like, nope, like I can clearly see now, if I want to age well, if I want to feel better about myself, I want to feel strong. Like we know why people exercise, right? But I'm going to be doing that for the rest of my life. And I think for some people that idea is intimidating. Oh, I got to do this forever. But it's like, yeah, you actually do. Exercise isn't one of those things where you do it for a week and say, okay, I'm all done. I'm healthy now.
Check.
Exactly. Check. And so it doesn't mean that you have to do the same type of exercise or go to the same gym or work out the same way. But you do, if this is important to you and you understand that, you accept it as it's not just a thing that you do. It's just a part of your lifestyle. It's more who you are than what you do. And once we can accept that, this is where I think it gets a lot easier, because then you're just doing it. You're like, this is who I am. We know that identity is such a massive predictor of habits, right? If I feel like I'm a healthy person, I believe I'm a healthy person, I'm going to do the things that healthy people do. And if I believe I'm unhealthy, then I'm going to do things that unhealthy people do. And we can see that with our bodies. We can see that in physical fitness. When it comes to the mental side of it, it's not, you don't look at somebody and be like, oh, like 6-pack abs. You don't see that. But it's the structure. It's the exact same thing. It's not the kind of thing that you do once or twice and say, I'm done. It's you make it a lifestyle of prioritizing your mental health, taking care of your mental health, doing things that are good for your mental health, and eliminating as many things that are bad for your mental health as you can. And again, you don't do that just like you don't start exercising and all of a sudden you're benching 400 pounds and running marathons. And it's like, it's not like that at all. You just start. You just start and you put one foot in front of the other and you just move in a direction. I'm a big fan, by the way, of not thinking about destinations nearly as much as a direction. Just have a direction and a process and just keep going. I think destinations, well, I mean, obviously it's important to have goals and know things that we want and that we're reaching for. It can put a lot of pressure on people, especially when those goals feel like they're forced on you. Oh, I have to have these goals. And it's like, I remember a mentor once, I was in a group at a community that I used to be in, and he asked the group, like, what do you want for your physical fitness goals? And one person who was a very healthy person and works out a lot and has great habits. And he said, I just want to be healthy and feel good and have good exercise habits. And the mentor was, or the leader of the community was like, no, I need like a specific goal. What's your specific goal? And I'm thinking, nope, those are my goals too. I want to age well. I want to feel great. I want to be mentally sharp. I want to feel good about myself. That's why I exercise. It's not about, I need to run a mile in, I actually have no idea what a good time is for a mile, so I shouldn't use that example. But you know what I mean? I think we need to, yeah. The quantitative results are great, but like how do you put a number on how good your marriage is or your relationship with your kids or how good you feel about yourself? You can measure these things, but really the things that matter most in life and the things that we get the most value out of in life are things that really don't have a number on them. There, how do you feel about that? I think we just need to pay more attention to that. And that doesn't mean eliminate the quantitative. It's just, let's pay attention to the direction, to the process, to the habits that you're building that let you sustain that process and stay on that path. And I think it's a really important thing for people to consider.
Yeah. Phenomenal. So you mentioned this idea previously about like this idea of trending, which I believe strongly with, right? Like this point that it's not so much the destination, because I always try to remind people everybody's going to the same place, and it's not the place you want to be right now. So let's maybe not focus so much on that, right? It's trending. You mentioned this idea of quantitative, not putting so much pressure on it. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think there's a piece too here of those people who do use those, use them as tools.
Yes.
Use them as a means by which to motivate yourself. If you're not doing anything and you're like, okay, I'm going to sign up for a 5K because that's going to motivate. I'm training for a 10K right now. Have I ran a 10K? Yes. I've done a half Ironman. Like, it's a lot longer. So the 10K, it's not about finishing it. It's about having something to look forward to. But I think the extra piece to that is not to be so attached to the outcome. Right. If I don't do my goal of the 10K, I have still trained 3 days a week for the last 12. It has caused me to have a regularly scheduled practice of running where I wasn't doing that previously. And so it's recognizing, like, why are you doing it? What's the intention behind it? And is it serving you? If it becomes something where you're hyper obsessed and you're reducing the time you have with your family and you're missing meals and you're constantly upset about it, it's like, well, then that's not serving you holistically. Would you agree to that?
I agree with that. Yeah. I'm not suggesting at all that we should eliminate quantitative, right? It's like you said, it can be a great tool. I'll use an example of when I did go to CrossFit, and I wasn't the typical CrossFitter. A lot of the people that I worked out with were like, I don't know if they were obsessed with their numbers, but they cared a lot about their numbers. And for me, the thing that mattered most was, am I getting in my workouts every week? Am I showing up? Am I being consistent? Am I working out? Do I feel great? Like, that was it. I cared about that so much more than, hey, did I add 10 pounds to my squat this week? You know what I mean? Like, that actually didn't matter to me. And I'm not saying it shouldn't matter to people, because we're all individuals and some of us really are driven by that. And that's great. But we do need a balance of qualitative and quantitative. I think even in companies, like in the business world, more leaders, or at least the forward-thinking leaders, are really starting to pay attention to that. Even getting away a little bit from, what's our return on investment, to a little bit more of what's our value on investment. Like, what are we actually getting out of this as people, as teams, as cultures, as a company? Who do we want to be? How do we want to show up? Yes, we still care about business performance. Obviously, it's important. We're a business. We need our people showing up. We need them being productive. We need them being engaged. But we also want them to feel great and love their lives. That part's qualitative, right? But those two things are not exclusive from each other. They are very much intertwined. Let's pay attention to both. And if we can pay attention to both and kind of find that balance, and the balance might be different for each individual and for each leader and for each company, but find your balance, and that's going to be a great place to be.
I love that. Yeah, my company, Next Better, right? The sentiment there is, what's the next thing that we can be doing to improve ourselves? I think a lot of people want to see improvement, and that's where those metrics come in. So again, I did CrossFit for a long time. I love the scientific qualitative aspect to it, or quantitative aspect to it, right? Like your Fran time, like you can see quantitatively you did the same amount of work in less time, and therefore you are more fit. The challenge becomes is when that's the only important thing, that you tear your rotator cuff doing butterfly pull-ups that you're not capable of doing yet, then that doesn't serve your health anymore. You're incapable
Right.
of doing that. I have way too many clients who they're like, I want to get back to what I was lifting in high school, right? I'm going to admit, typically men, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, like, what does that look like? Well, I was deadlifting 400 pounds. I was like, you lift a laptop for work, right? Like that's the heavy thing you lift, right? Is it worth the herniated disc to try to get back to your glory days? Like what are we doing here?
Is it a 400-pound laptop, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
with you.
really it's like the 1980s computer, right? So but that's it. It's what's your intention behind the practice, right?
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, is as you're training for whatever it is you're training for. It could be physical fitness. It could be I want this great marriage. I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great leader at work. Here's the business result that we're working towards. A sales target or whatever it is, or growth targets. Um, it's cliche to say it, but it's so true that it's not about the destination. It's about the journey. All the great stuff happens on the journey. So who do you need to become, and how are you going to show up on that journey to, like you said, you might not hit your target. Hopefully you do, but you might not. And that's okay, because who you become and what you learn about yourself and how much you grow in that process is really more valuable than any end metric. And you can always take another shot at that end metric too, right? It's not like life's over just because you didn't hit it the first time, but you got to give yourself the best chance. It's like I always say, you can't guarantee the outcome, but you can absolutely guarantee what you put into it, to maximize your opportunity of success. So I'm just a big believer in that. Again, like I go back to the most important things in my life are things I don't measure with data.
Yeah.
It's I know them to be true. Tell me how much you love your kids. Give me data about that. No, thanks. I know how much I love my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a really popular video, or at least popular to me. I see it on my feed all the time, from Simon Sinek, who wrote Start With Why, Find Your Why,
Yep.
about like, give me the data that shows that your spouse loves you. Give me the exact moment,
Right. Yeah.
right? You can't, because it's an infinite series of moments of the time that you walked in the door and they just smiled at you and you're like, oh yeah, I am safe, I am loved, I'm here. It's the things that we cannot measure that are the most meaningful to who we are. And I think that's drastic. Now, that being said, one of the things that, people, you and I are a business to some degree, right?
Sure.
Like what we offer, we have to pay for. And usually people pay for quote unquote results, which are hard to measure. So I'll ask you this, Cory, because I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. However, there are also people who are like, how do you know you're doing well? Like, how do you know the people that you're serving are improving? So what are the things that you're looking for in your clients that let you know that we're trending in the right direction in this thing called, mental wellness and mental fitness?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, it's both. It's a mixture of both. There is this part of me that has this idea, like very similar to the way I explained my CrossFit experience, where the biggest win for me is when people are in the mental gym because they just know their lives are better being in the gym than not being in the gym. That's it. But you can see these things. Now, individually, it's going to show up a little bit different for each person, but you definitely see these themes and these patterns that really impact the majority of people. They're often talking about things like, one, how they feel. So we'll also measure burnout. We typically see a 44% reduction in burnout in as little as 12 weeks. Now, that's a personal measure of that, right? It's somebody reporting on how burnt out they feel. We see improvements in productivity at work, which is a big thing. You see people make more money and get promoted faster at work because they're showing up differently, which is a really great thing. On a company level, you're going to see people who are sticking around longer. So retention goes up, net promoter score goes up. And the reason for that is, they feel valued at the company. Now they feel appreciated. They're being invested in. So that's a big part of that. But you see data around resilience, energy levels, quality of relationships, that sort of thing. These things are all great. The data is great to see. I really love it when somebody comes into the gym one week and they say, you know what, I took this tool home and I used it with my wife or my husband or my kids or something like that. And wow, here's the difference. And then the next week they come back and they say, here's the situation I was in at work with my team or with a customer or something like that. And I use this other tool and wow, here's this thing that happened. And what they're doing here is, like, we start to hear things like very early in the process, but we get to recognize it's a sign of things to come, right? You're building this foundation, you're building and building on top of it. So I get excited when I hear somebody report something early in their gym experience that I know, weeks from now, months from now, years from now, this is going to snowball into something amazing because you actually have flipped this switch in your brain. And once those switches flip, they don't flip back. But yeah, I love hearing things about quality of relationships, again, because just like being a husband and dad are so important to me. So that's something that personally I resonate with a lot. I love hearing when teams feel so connected and they build such an incredible amount of trust with each other going through this process together. And so they're more collaborative, they're more engaged, they're closing bigger deals, landing bigger clients, like that sort of thing is a big thing, or accomplishing more in their business. I love physical fitness too. A lot of people we don't teach people how to exercise or anything like that, or how to eat well. But sure enough, when your brain's wired differently, people take a lot better care of themselves. And so they start eating better, they start exercising more and developing sustainable habits. We do work on habits, just not those specific habits. And so what you're seeing here is this kind of holistic change in people's lives at work and at home. They're showing up in a way where they're excited about who they are, they're proud of who they are. It's impacting their business, it's impacting their families, it's impacting their happiness and their fulfillment in life. So these are the sort of things that we do have data about it. But to your point about, I think the Simon Sinek example is a great one. When you come home and you have that feeling, right, when you walk in the door, it's that same thing where you're seeing this in somebody's eyes as they're sharing this experience, this new experience of their lives that they know is now something they can repeat as much as they want, because now, again, the switch is flipped. And you're just seeing it in them. They're like, this feeling of, holy crap, this is real for me now. I've now leveled up and I will continue to level up. So that's the kind of thing that I love the most. So again, lots of patterns, happiness, performance, certainly mental health, again, like huge reductions in burnout, huge reductions in feeling stress and anxiety, huge improvements in feeling calm and in control and present and things like that. Like for sure, we love that stuff. But nothing beats when something's really important to somebody in their own lives. Again, it could be at work, it could be at home, it could be in their community. And you see how they are fundamentally showing up differently. And how much that means to them, and how much that ripple effect to their family, to their team, throughout their culture and organization. That's exciting stuff to see.